We are very, very lucky to have Standards editor and Storyful journalist Alan ORiordan here. And I would like to please you on stage, my friend. And then you give us some insights. So, your applause.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start with a short video, give you an idea of what we do, and then we can hopefully take it from there. So, here we go.
We are part of a golden age of journalism and storytelling. Everybody now is a storyteller. There's hundreds of hours of YouTube video uploaded every single minute. But when everybody's telling a story, which stories are worth listening to?
Storyful is the first social media news agency in the world.
One of the big stories we've been covering today is Yemen. We found this pretty dramatic video. So what we want to do is go to Google Maps, establish the location. We find the building here, which matches exactly. And now we're going to attempt to get clearance for the content and provide it to our clients for use. Hi, my name is Joe Galvin. I'm a journalist with the news agency Storyful.com.
We've really prided ourselves in trying to build technology matched with expert journalism to basically mine the social web.
Anything that's happening on social media anywhere in the world, on any platform, we find it, we curate it, we post it.
Technology has really made our job different in that we can get the stories that are meaningful and truthful out there.
Google tools and services have been critical for us since the very beginning, from translation to 24-hour Google Hangouts. When human skill matches really cool technology, it's greater than the sum of the parts. And that's the reason why Storyful has had such traction.
It's about storytelling, being able to match that with technology to find the stories worth telling. How do we take the pulse of the internet to get to the truth and really contextualize it, editorialize it?
Defining the narrative, that's the search for truth. And that's what Storyful is doing, bringing an authenticity to storytelling.
I get up every day because I believe journalism plays an incredibly important role in the power of user-generated content.
It makes me feel empowered that social media today is such a vital role in people being able to share their stories.
Helping people tell their stories and their truth. We take it very seriously. It's a source of great pride.
Social media is going to be media. Social journalism will be journalism. And I'm looking forward to the time when Storyful will become absolutely standard within journalism.
Okay, so that, in a nutshell, I think gives you an idea of what we're about and what we do. I'm tasked today to talk about something called the Open Newsroom. There it is. Which I think that video gives you a hint, really, of what the Open Newsroom can mean. And I suppose the Open Newsroom has always been what newsrooms are, in the sense that a newsroom is something that's open to leads, to what the correspondents have to say, to information from the outside world, which, of course, a newsroom by its nature processes and sends back out with its essential, the journalistic process having been brought to bear on such material. So, in a sense, the newsroom has always been open, but I think there are two ways in which it's more open, shall we say, than ever. One of those would be the ease of communication, which allows simple, fast, effective collaboration by journalists in a way that hasn't really happened before, and which we have used, and some of the awards mentioned have been based on that sort of long-term verification process in areas like human rights and so on, which can find interesting evidence, and with the help of experts, lead somewhere that is journalistically interesting from that kind of thing, which has its origins on social media. In another way, a newsroom now is tasked with being open to any public statement, any public video, any public piece of content which may be useful for the purposes of journalism. And that is another kettle of fish entirely, because that is, you know, a mixed blessing. I mean, it's a catch-22. It's all out there. How do you? It's all out there. It's all well, none of it is prima facie reliable, because none of it is verified. We don't know who these sources are. They're not our correspondents. There are people making public statements. There are people making public videos, public images, all of which potentially may be of use to the news business, to journalists. And the question is, how do you tame that beast? How do you listen intelligently to these sources and find things that will actually help the cause of journalism, help a story that you're covering, help tell a story that's worth telling? And that's the key difference, I think. So as I said, intelligent listening is the method, I suppose, and the cliche we use is to say news from noise, because 99.9% of what goes on social media won't actually be of any use or interest to a journalist. However, the 0.01 or even 0.1% where people are on the scene, people are there, people have witnessed something, people are sharing something that's useful, be it information, photography, videos, that is what we need to find, because there's always someone closer to the story now. If something happens, let's say the Brussels attacks happened, of course, there's always someone close to the story. I mean, it was a busy airport, a busy metro, and I know of one or two journalists who happened to be there. But in general, of course, you're talking about regular citizens who witness something, who might post something publicly. And the question then arises, how do you, as a newsroom, react to that? How do you, in the first instance, gather that? How do you verify that? How do you make sure that the uploader or the content owner's rights are adhered to? So that's basically what we do, and that's the onus is really on newsrooms, I think, to be open to that process and to decide what best way for themselves to do that. And that it counts not just for specialist agencies like ourselves, but newsrooms and newspapers. And the tools available, you could, of course, become a Storyful customer, but there's other tools like Banjo and the CrowdTangle, and they all are useful and they all have a certain value, but they all are premised, and I think the way they must be used is a shared premise. And one of the starting points is the fact that there's always someone closer to the story. And the others, obviously, it follows from that, how do you find that someone? I'll just give a quick illustration of how Storyful does it, but like I said, there are different methods, but I think the overall premise, the overall theory behind those methods is one that we can say is shared, really. So finding that someone is something that we do at Storyful by, first we build an infrastructure. So in this sense, I'm just using Twitter as an example. We have built Twitter lists of sources and of people we find are reliable in every country, every city in the world. Naturally, this is too big a resource for a human to follow properly. So we have a thing called AlertBot, which sits on all our resources. And anytime, let's say, this is just a screenshot from a few days ago, let's say Haiti, our list in Haiti, either the velocity spikes above its normal rate, or there are certain words that are being used in the list more than regularly. AlertBot will see this and tell me, and I'll get this on my tweet deck, and I'll say, okay, AlertBot is telling me this, and then I'll go to my Haiti list itself, see what's going on in Haiti, assess that, see whether it's worth covering, and go from there. Similarly, we have a system here which is a visualization of our sources around the world. It sits on my desktop, and it's not something that is going to really distract me from my other work, because it's simply a visual tool. It's not a word tool as such. Green means, situation normal. It tells me a survey of what's popular in my network at the moment. By network, I mean by my network, I mean Storyful's network. So it's a global reference point. Generally, though, this is a rundown of things that are popular on the left here, but it's generally telling me that it's kind of normal. When something big happens, you're going to see straight to the top the relevant hashtag or the relevant piece of vocabulary, and it will be red. You'll see red across, and it'll just jump out at me on my screen. I won't miss it, and then I know it's something worth looking for. Then what do you do? That's the question. So you have an information, let's say, we know, minutes, seconds after for instance, to use a recent example, the Brussels attacks start, we know what's happening. Then what do you do? We have a system, again, which we use called Stream Desk, and this is how it looks to it's not the prettiest thing in the world, I admit, but it works. So what we do in Stream Desk is I'm an editor in the editing desk at Storyful. I see this through my network, something has happened. I will then designate a journalist to go deeper into the story to find the people who are on the scene, who are posting videos, who are potential witnesses, potential interviewees for journalists. We will build a search similar like this. This is just a story in Somalia a few days ago. We populate the terms with the you can see keywords. We put the location, and that's the geo there. So we're going to narrow our search to the location that happened, the words we think people are going to use, and as you can see, it's a multi-platform search. So it searches across all social content for videos, images, and so on that are of use. And then we can extract the ones that we think are worth investigating further. We verify them. We pass them on to our clients. That's basically how it goes from start to the final product, which is journalism, essentially. Journalism being brought to bear in the sense of asking questions, verifying if the thing says what it purports to say. And then, as I said, that's our way of doing it, but it's a process that I think every newsroom, it behoves them really to have a similar process in place, or to have a product that does that, because it's a way to get to the story on the one hand, and it also, I think it's vital really for the purpose of journalism to do what we do, which is insert journalism between the raw feed of unverified, unaccountable sources of information and the end product of journalism. So we feel that while technology is useful for tip-offs and leads, and of course the gathering of the information, it still needs to be verified, because otherwise you fall into the seductive trap of rapid publication, passing on rumor, and we see this time and again. I'm always amazed really that it still happens, because we've been sort of beating the drum on this for years now, but every time a big story happens, things go wrong, and it's a salutary lesson, I think, because trust in media is something that I think we shouldn't take for granted, and I think it's important that if we are going to use news sources, they should nonetheless have the same standard applied to them as normal journalism always has had, which I think newspapers have a role to play in this. So that's basically how I would break down what we do. You need to find a way to find the signal, find something that will alert you to the signal, discover what's worth discovering. And the benefits that accrue for this are, I think, as laid out here. You'll get to the story fast. You'll get accuracy, because the further away from the point of the incident that you get in social, the more likely it is that erroneous information, that there's passing off happening, that there's repackaging of content, mislabeled, and there's retweeting, and it's the faster you get to the event, you get through all that distraction, all that complication. You can circumvent that by being there fast. Not being there fast in the sense of the finished product, that takes as long as it takes to verify, I find, but to get to the incident itself fast is what the crucial part is in terms of accuracy and in terms of verification. Because, this is why, the longer on from an event, a news event, happens, you won't have the wisdom of the crowd, unfortunately. You'll have the distraction and misdirection of the crowd, which I think is the troubling part of all this. And here's a good example of it. Excuse me. You can ignore the logo in the bottom right-hand corner. I don't mean to name and shame anybody, but this is a video you've seen, probably all of you, and it was circulated in the minutes after the Brussels attack, and the attribution was to somebody who was not at the scene. And we saw this on our monitors in the newsroom and everyone using it, but we knew that this person wasn't on the scene. We found a previous, earlier version of the video, so we figured then that it was unlikely that this person was there. And sure enough, a few hours later, she said, "This is not my video, I'm not in Brussels." But we had already told all our clients that this was the case, so the ones that listened to us didn't run that video. However, we did find the person who did upload it. We got him on the phone. We asked him if he was at the scene. And then we licensed it with him, because we will on a case-by-case basis enter a licensing contract with somebody if they feel that their intellectual property needs to be protected, and if we feel there is a value in what they've done. So it's a case-by-case thing, but we occasionally do it for news videos. So on our system, you had a verified, correctly attributed version of the footage, and the question arises, how did you find that this was the correct version? And it goes back to good old-fashioned journalism. This is the point I would stress. We have all this tech, we have the source, we have the video, we're on the scene, but how do we know that this person is reliable? The question is, we rang him, we talked to him, he was there, we got him to send us a photo of himself. We even got, he even told us that his friend was standing behind him filming the shot. So you could see our man filming the video in his friend's video, which he sent us. So it doesn't often get that easy, but in this case it was. So we did track him down, and we had a video that we knew was correctly attributed and correctly sourced, which I think is important, as I said, given the fact that if journalism is going to use this sort of stuff that's not prima facie reliable, it should make every effort to make it reliable before it's called journalism. Here we go. Can I get this to play, I wonder? Yes, here we go.
Footage captures the morning rush hour scene on the metro platform near Maelbeck, then the moment of the terror blast, which ended the daily commute abruptly. Panic breaks out as many try to run through the smoke and dust.
So that's another example. There's a small problem with this one, which Storyful clients were also aware of. We have on the left Minsk in 2011, and we have Brussels 2016 in the right-hand pane. So as you can see, this is what happens in every single breaking news situation. Somebody downloads a video from the internet, labels it something it isn't, it goes out, and this happens all the time. As again, my example is merely illustrative. This was used in many outlets on the day. And again, it's something that we pride ourselves on. You know, on the one hand, we advise people. For instance, here we go. One of our clients is Mashable. They were able to run a feature on the fake CCTV, which is not something we always, would necessarily lend itself to a feature story, but it's always something that Storyful clients are made aware of. Behind the scenes, we tell people, don't run that, do run that, and so on and so forth. And this is just one example of how it can go wrong. So the conclusion to that, I think, would be that it's entirely essential that we find ways to listen intelligently to the sources of social. Act fast, and I think by what I mean is be poised to act fast through an alert system. The sooner the journalist is inserted into the equation, the better. If it takes a couple of hours to turn that raw material into journalism, that's fine. But I think getting to the point of the incident as fast as possible is what allows this kind of information, this kind of compelling first-hand account to be made into journalism easier, which I think is what really journalists need to do with this new kind of resource, which is a kind of a curse in a way because there's so much of it and it's so difficult to handle. But there are ways we can do this, and the three key things are to listen intelligently, act fast, and use the crowd, but don't trust it without good reason. So yes, use the crowd, of course, because that's how, by its nature, we get the tip-offs. But the crowd doesn't always know, and I think that the seduction of the crowd is something that we see time and again. It's just a classic of all journalism, and newspaper journalism in particular, which is, don't assume. And this is an I would urge you to Google this later because it's a good read. But the collateral damage of social news gathering was a piece we did for our partners, First Draft News, which again looked at a rush to publish, a rush to assume that because the crowd is saying something, it's saying something that's worth repeating. And this has really grave consequences, actually, for the people involved. We had a tragic case of misidentification in the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, where a family who were looking for their missing son had to be dragged through the media. He turned out to have died by suicide. So it was terrible for them and made a situation they were struggling with far worse, to be in this media glare because certain news organizations decided it was okay to reprint the rumor that this was the perpetrator. Similarly, there was a mass shooting in the States, which this talks about, a couple of months back, where the shooter was identified on a message board. Again, this rumor was widely shared by so-called reputable news organizations, and we at Storyful managed to track the guy down and talk to him on the phone and got him to send us a video of him in a different location at the time, so thereby proving his innocence. But it just goes to show that there's a wealth of information out there, but we really can't forget to insert the process of journalism, something I think the newspaper industry does better than anybody else, into that equation before we pass on anything we found on social. Next. Yeah. Finally, I think it bears saying that, given all I've just discussed, that we have been here before. The Storyful was founded by a TV anchor, an Irish TV anchor, and former foreign correspondent with the national broadcaster. But the first person he hired was a former newspaper editor. And among the handful of early journalistic hires, we built out a tech team and we built out a journalist team simultaneously. And among the early hires on the journalistic team were several, excuse me, several newspaper editors. I joined somewhat later. I think there was as many as, 10 people in the company before I joined, so I was a latecomer. But I came from that background too. My previous jobs were with the Irish Times and with the New York Times as an editor, a newspaper editor again. So while many are keen to consign newspapers to the trash can of history, while you often read about a crisis in editing in the business, and indeed in the week when many of my former colleagues in the New York Times office in Paris have been told that they're losing their jobs in October, we have found in our experience in Storyful that newspaper editors bring a skill set to this kind of material which really is unmatched in any other school of journalism, any other practice of journalism. What we bring is a reluctance to rush, a skepticism, and a united kind of glee, shall we say, and goal to make our reporters' days a misery. So what we like to do is stop them in their tracks, challenge them, send the stories back, reject the stories, do all that which we used to do regularly without thinking in the newspaper context. We now do that every day at Storyful in a so-called new media context. And it's a lesson, I think, that we should learn, and for the industry as a whole, I think. And it's something to remind ourselves that and I'm conscious this is a newspaper congress, so as we move into this new frontier, as we are in this transition between print and whatever not print will be, we need to remember that the translation of skills from the former to the latter is, to me, clear, essential, and I feel it's being overlooked. So I'd like to stress, finally, that the business of making newspapers has a practice and a culture which is essential in the proper treatment of this new source of potential journalistic material. So I think I'd leave it with that. Thanks for your time, and thank you.